The message from Tasha glowed on my phone screen like radioactive waste, just as dangerous and toxic. I'd been staring at it for about 5 minutes now, hesitant to open it. When my older sister texts on a Tuesday in the middle of the afternoon, it means only one thing: another family event where I'll be slowly dissected like a frog in biology class. Hey, baby girl. Family dinner at our place on Friday, 8 o'clock. Mommy insists you be there. Says you've been avoiding the family again. Come, we miss you. Tash. They miss you. Of course they do. How could they not miss being a convenient target for ridicule? I put the phone away and turned to the computer monitor. The tables of numbers were comforting. Unlike humans, numbers are always honest. Add them up correctly and you get the right result. No emotions, no double standards. I didn't choose the accounting profession for nothing. The office of the Western Foundation's construction company hummed as usual. The air conditioner was making strange noises, as if it was about to take its last breath, and in the corner they were noisily discussing some TV series. I plunged into my work, trying not to think about dinner, but my thoughts kept returning to my family. Our relationship hadn't deteriorated overnight. It was a gradual erosion, like soil erosion, imperceptible on a daily basis, but devastating in the end. My parents always preferred Tasha: bright, outgoing, loud. I was quiet, immersed in books, weird, as my mother used to say. Over the years, the gap only grew wider. The real turning point came 5 years ago when Grandma Edna died. The only person in the family who really loved me, who saw me. Grandma left me a house in Fontana and a pretty decent amount of money. It was her conscious choice. She knew my parents had always been supportive of Tasha, helping her with opening a beauty salon and leaving me to manage on my own. The will was supposed to restore justice. But in my family, justice is a relative concept. After the funeral, a real campaign began. My mom cried about how unfairly Tasha was deprived. My dad was sullenly silent, but his judgmental gaze spoke more than words. Tasha walked around with her eyes swollen with tears and complained that her business was on the verge of collapse. "Aaron, honey," Mom said, "you do realize that Grandma was already out of her mind in her later years. She didn't realize what she was doing. You have a stable job and Tasha has 3 kids and her own business. She needs it more," Dad echoed. "I've always been closer to my grandmother. This is some kind of mistake," Tasha sobbed, even though she visited her grandmother once every 6 months, if she even remembered she existed. In the end, I gave up. I agreed to a compromise, to sell the house and split the money. A friend of my father's acted as a lawyer, and they prepared the documents. I signed the papers, naively trusting the family. Only later, when everything was completed, I realized that I was left with practically nothing. Cunningly drawn contracts, hidden commissions, additional agreements. Everything was designed so that the lion's share would go to Tasha and my parents. When I tried to protest, I was told that I was ungrateful and selfish, that a real family shares everything, that I should be happy to help my sister and her children. That's when I started collecting documents, first just out of curiosity, then out of a growing certainty that it wasn't just the inheritance that was wrong. Being an accountant gave me skills and access to information. I began to track the finances of the family business. My father, formerly retired, consulted for several construction companies, including the one I worked for. Tasha owned a beauty salon called Rare Flower, which I suspected was the perfect tool for money laundering. Mom was in real estate sales, specializing in homes in Fontana and the surrounding area. For 3 years, I meticulously gathered information: tax returns with underreported income, double bookkeeping at Tasha's salon, fake clients, my father's bogus counseling sessions, questionable real estate deals done by Mom, and most importantly, Grandma's inheritance papers, with clear signs of fraud and forgery. The file was getting thicker and thicker. I kept it in a safe deposit box, backed it up, stored some of the documents in an encrypted cloud. I didn't know why I was collecting it all. Maybe as insurance, maybe for future blackmail, or just to know the truth. Sometimes I thought I was going crazy. Normal people don't collect dirt on their own family. But then I'd remember another humiliation at the family table, another taunt from Tasha, another scornful look from my father, and I'd return to my investigations with renewed vigor. I reread Tasha's message. Family dinner. Once again pretending to be a loving younger sister and daughter. Once again to listen to condescending remarks about my boring job, failed personal life, unfashionable clothes. To once again see them living on money that should have belonged to me. Or not pretend? My finger hovered over the keyboard. I almost decided to say no. But something stopped me. Maybe it was a moment of weakness, maybe a glimmer of hope that one day they would change. Or maybe it was the realization that running away wouldn't solve anything. I will. Thanks for the invite, I wrote, and hit send before I could change my mind. I turned back to the spreadsheets on the monitor, but I couldn't focus. The thought of the file folder wouldn't let go. It was in the safe at my house, behind a painting of a stormy sea, a gift from my grandmother for my 25th birthday. It's a reminder, she said, hanging the painting on the wall of my apartment. Even in the worst storm, there is a shore somewhere. You just have to sail in the right direction. Grandma knew about the strained relationships in the family. I think that's why she left the inheritance to me, to give me a chance at independence, at freedom from toxic family ties. I failed to live up to her expectations, allowed myself to be deceived. Maybe it's time to right that wrong. Friday was approaching, and every day I asked myself the same question. Should I take the papers or not? Part of me longed for revenge, for justice, for payback. The other part feared the consequences, the ultimate breakup, the judgment. On Friday morning, I still hesitated. It was pouring rain outside my small apartment window, as if nature had decided to add drama to my musings. I stood in front of the open safe, looking at the thick black folder. This has to end one day, I said aloud, and the solution came by itself. I took the folder and put it in my briefcase. After all, they're just documents. I don't have to use them. But they would be with me, as a defense, as proof that I wasn't crazy, that all of this was really happening, as a reminder that I won't let myself be humiliated this time. All day at work, I was distracted. I made 2 calculation errors, which is completely atypical for me. Colleagues cast concerned glances, but no one dared to ask what was wrong. Personal space was respected in our company, and I was especially grateful for that today. Toward evening, the rain stopped, and when I left the office, the air was fresh and clean. It was as if the world had washed up and prepared for something new. I inhaled deeply, smelling the wet asphalt and ozone. At home, I stood in front of my closet for a long time, deciding what to wear. In the end, I chose a strict, dark blue dress. It gave me confidence. A minimum of makeup, my hair gathered in a neat ponytail. Nothing flashy or outlandish. I didn't want to give them any more reasons to make fun of me. I checked the contents of my briefcase one more time before I left. The documents were in place, neatly organized into sections, with color-coded tabs for easy navigation. 3 years of painstaking work, collected in one folder. Just protection, I reminded myself as I closed my briefcase. But deep inside, I knew something was going to change today, forever. Tasha's house looked exactly as I expected, perfect. A 2-story Victorian-style mansion with an impeccably manicured lawn and neat flower beds. Fontana is a small town, but my sister had managed to snag one of the most prestigious homes in the central neighborhood. Earnest money, as she liked to emphasize. If only she knew how much information about her honest earnings was in my briefcase. I parked my used Ford between my father's gleaming Lexus and Tasha's brand new Range Rover. My car looked so out of place here that I could almost hear it apologizing for its existence, much like myself at these family gatherings. Taking my briefcase, I paused for a second, wondering if I should leave it in the car. But the determination that had brought me here, along with the papers, was still there. I slung the belt over my shoulder and headed for the front door. Tasha opened the door before I could ring the bell. Her perfectly styled blonde hair, flawless makeup, and white smile could have graced the cover of a housewives magazine. "Erin, you came after all!" She threw her arms around me in a wave of luscious perfume. And almost on time, too. Almost was the key word. I had intentionally arrived 15 minutes early, but I was always late for Tasha, even if I was the first one there. "Hello, Tasha," I said, trying to keep my voice warm. "Thank you for inviting me." "What do you have there?" She nodded at my briefcase. "Did you bring your work with you?" Friday night? Oh, Aaron, you're so, predictable. I ignored the shot. Just some papers I need to go over, I replied, walking into the spacious hallway. Are the parents here yet? Of course, Tasha rolled her eyes. They'd arrived an hour ago, helping set the table. Unlike some people. I didn't bother to remind her that no one had asked me to show up early and help. It was useless. In our family, facts rarely mattered when it came to accusations against me. We made our way to the living room where my parents sat with glasses of wine. My mom, Laurel Mercer, with her flawlessly dyed brown hair and perpetually disgruntled expression, was the first to notice me. Aaron, honey, finally, she exclaimed, as if I'd kept them waiting for hours. We were about to start without you. My father, Wilbur Mercer, just nodded at me, not looking away from his glass. At 65, he still had a trim figure and imposing posture, though his hair had long since turned gray. His father was always a man of few words, preferring to express disapproval with looks and gestures rather than words. I'm 15 minutes early, I said, but immediately regretted it. Justifying myself was an admission of guilt. Oh, don't start, Mom sighed. Always with those precise calculations. You're at a family dinner, not in your accounting office. Relax. I forced myself to smile and leaned over to kiss her cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and a light wine scent. I'm sorry, Mom, you're right. Of course I'm right. She patted my hand with a look of triumph. Tasha, pour your sister some wine. Just not the good stuff we opened with the meat. Give her something simpler. My sister nodded obediently and headed for the bar. I set my briefcase down by the couch and sat down next to my dad. How's work going, Dad? I asked, trying to start a neutral conversation. He raised his eyebrows as if surprised that I dared to speak to him. It's fine, he answered after a pause. I'm consulting on a new project in the northern neighborhood. Big development. Interesting, I said, even though I knew about the project from the documents in my briefcase. Could you tell me more about it? Why? He shrugged. You'd be bored anyway. It's not numbers in a column. Tasha came back with a glass of cheap white wine for me, nearly spilling it as she set it on the table. She just wants to seem interested, Dad, my sister laughed. Our Erin was always a good actress. Remember how she used to feign interest in baseball games so you'd take her to the stadium with you? I did love baseball, I objected. Of course you did, Tasha winked at her father. And she also pretended to like cooking when she was courting that guy. What's his name? Gary? Garth, I corrected. And I wasn't pretending. Never mind, Tasha waved her hand. Dinner's ready. Let's go to the table. I grabbed my briefcase and followed everyone into the dining room. Tasha gave me a surprised look. Are you seriously carrying that thing around with you everywhere? What's in it, gold bars? I just don't want to leave it unattended, I answered calmly. Oh my God, Aaron, Mom interjected. You're at your sister's house, not the train station. No one's going to steal your precious papers here. I didn't say anything, though I could have reminded myself of my grandmother's inheritance. It was in this house, over a similar family dinner, that I'd been persuaded to sign the first documents that started my financial ruin. Tasha's dining room was the epitome of her idea of luxury, a massive dark wood table, crystal glasses, silverware, and gilded china. It was overdone, but impressive, I had to admit. I set my briefcase next to my chair and sat down, trying to ignore the condescending glances. Dinner began with asparagus puree soup. Tasha liked to show off her culinary talents, though I suspected it was the hired cook, not her. The soup was perfectly seasoned, but I could barely taste it. I was so tense. How's your salon, Tasha? Mom asked, even though she probably knew the answer. The question was just an excuse to brag again. It's amazing! Tasha glowed. We've made record profits this month. We launched a new line of treatments using French cosmetics. The clients are thrilled. Some are booking a month in advance. That's my girl, Mom proudly exclaimed. I always knew you had an entrepreneurial spirit. Yes, not like some people, my father added, giving me an eloquent glance. Some people in our family create businesses, others, counting other people's money. I took a sip of wine, trying to hold back my irritation. Accounting is a respected profession, Dad. Of course, dear, Mom interjected in a conciliatory tone that was actually condescending. Somebody's got to do it too. You could be the CFO of my salon, Tasha suggested with a fake smile. I'd even pay you, well, maybe not market rate, but family friendly. I knew she didn't mean it. It was just another way of emphasizing the difference in our statuses. She's a successful businesswoman. I'm a salaried employee. Thank you, but I'm happy with my job, I replied. Really? Tasha looked genuinely surprised. Sitting around all day working on numbers? No socializing, no creativity? It's so depressing. Not everyone finds happiness in chatting with clients about the latest trends in eyebrow tinting, I said, notwithstanding my wry remark. There was a tense silence. My mom frowned, my dad shook his head, and Tasha pressed her lips into a thin line. I'd broken the unspoken rule of never responding to their teasing. I'm sorry, I said, though I felt no remorse. I didn't mean to offend. It's okay, Tasha replied with a strained smile. I realize you're just jealous. I have everything: a husband, children, a successful business, a beautiful house. And you have, well, you have your spreadsheets in your computer. I gritted my teeth, but I didn't say anything. Tasha's husband, Brent Fowler, worked for an insurance company and, for all I knew, was having an affair with the receptionist. The kids were in an elite boarding school and only came home for vacations. And the business. Well, I knew more about business than she realized. The main course, duck with orange sauce, passed in relative calm. We discussed neutral topics: the weather, the latest city news, politics, superficially, without diving into sharp corners. I almost relaxed, deciding that tonight's dinner could end without serious conflict. But over dessert, tiramisu, which Tasha had supposedly made from a secret recipe from her friend's Italian grandmother, the conversation inevitably returned to me. Aaron, honey, Mom began with that distinctive tone that foreshadowed an unpleasant conversation. Your father and I are worried about you. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Why would we be? Don't pretend you don't understand, she sighed. You're already 35. No husband, no kids, no career prospects. You're stuck in life. I have a stable job and… So? Tasha interrupted. A small apartment, an old car, no personal life. That's not what a woman dreams of. You don't know what I dream of, I said quietly. We just want to help you, Mom continued. Maybe you should meet Tasha's friend's son. He's a lawyer, divorced, but no children. He's a very promising young man. And what? He's in trouble with the law? I couldn't resist. If he needs his own accountant right away. You see? Exclaimed Tasha. That's why you have no one. You're too sarcastic, too cold. Men don't like that kind. What kind do they like? Like you? The words came out before I could stop them. Yeah, like me. Tasha raised her voice. Caring, feminine, able to create a cozy and supportive conversation, and not nerds with a calculator instead of a heart. Girls, girls, Mom intervened, although it was obvious that she was on Tasha's side. Let's not fight. I'm not fighting, I said, trying to stay calm. I just don't understand why my life bothers you so much. I'm happy the way I am. Happy? Tasha snorted. You? Don't be ridiculous. You've always been envious and resentful. Always thought you were treated unfairly. Even when your grandmother, God rest her soul, left you her entire inheritance, you managed to feel like a victim. I felt the blood rush to my face. Tasha had brought up the taboo subject again, the inheritance they'd stolen from me. Don't touch Grandma, I said, clutching my napkin. She had nothing to do with this. Oh, of course, Tasha rolled her eyes. Saint Edna and her favorite Aaron. She always singled you out, even though I was older and took more care of her. And then she left you everything without even thinking of my children. You visited her once every 6 months, and that was if I reminded you, I objected, feeling my emotions slipping away. And you know very well that you ended up with the lion's share of her inheritance. Only because you agreed to share, Tasha parried. Like normal families should do. Normal? I grinned bitterly. Our family is far from normal. And here it comes, my father sighed. Erin is always whining about how everyone is hurting her. When are you going to grow up, girl? I opened my mouth to answer, But Tasha stood up abruptly from the table, grabbed her water glass, and before anyone could react, threw it in my face. The cold water hit my cheeks and ran down the collar of my dress. I froze with shock and humiliation. You know what? Tasha looked at me with contempt. You have 10 minutes to get out of my house. I'm tired of your perpetual complaints and accusations. We're all tired. I expected my parents to intervene, to chastise Tasha for this behavior. But instead, my mother nodded approvingly, and my father even clapped his hands. It's about time you put her in her place, he said. Well done, Tasha. Really, darling, said Mom. Sometimes you have to be tough. Aaron's been acting out a lot lately. I sat there feeling the water dripping from my hair onto my dress, the humiliation changing to anger and the anger to cold determination. They'd gone too far, all three of them, and tonight they're going to pay for it. Slowly, without saying a word, I pulled a black file folder from my briefcase. I wiped my face with a napkin, smiled, and put the folder on the table. Well, I said icily, looking at their surprised faces. Then you have only 10 minutes to pray. There was silence in the room. Drops of water from my hair fell on the table, creating the only sound in this daze. I looked at my family's faces. Incomprehension, confusion, the first glimmers of anxiety. A few seconds ago, they had felt like masters of the situation, but the black folder on the table had changed the dynamic, though they hadn't yet realized how much. Tasha was the first to break the silence, trying to regain control of the situation. What are you talking about? What other prayers? She laughed, but it sounded fake. And what's that file? Your will? Not exactly. I opened the first page. More like yours. My father squinted, his face tense. Aaron, if you're trying to scare us, intimidate? I raised an eyebrow. No, Dad. I'm just sharing information, documented information, like this consulting work you've been doing for Western foundations. Remember that project in the Northern District you mentioned? Funny thing is, there's no real trace of your services in the books. But there are invoices, fictitious reports, and money transfers to shell companies. My father's face turned pale, but he kept his composure. Have you been digging through your company's financial records? It's illegal. He gritted his teeth. No more illegal than cheating on government contracts or tax evasion, I countered, pulling out the next sheet of paper. This one is particularly interesting. Your salon's tax returns, Tasha. Or rather, two versions, the one that was filed with the IRS and the real one. I put the two documents next to each other. Tasha stared at them, her beautiful face contorted. You spied on me? Infiltrated my computer? Her voice shook with rage and fear. I didn't need to infiltrate. You gave me access, remember? When you had problems with your accounting program and you asked me to see what was wrong. I did. And I found a lot of interesting things. I turned to my mother. And this file here is for you, Mom. Real estate transactions in Fontana, especially with houses sold at an undervalued price to fake buyers, then resold at the real price. Classic money laundering scheme. Mom turned pale, then suddenly jumped up, her face red with anger. It's slander. All of it. You've always been jealous, always wanted to destroy our family, she shouted. Do you think anyone would believe an accountant with no name and no position against us? People, probably not, I agreed calmly. But the tax authorities, the prosecutor's office, and the financial police might. They have special departments that deal with just such cases. Tasha laughed, but her laughter was hysterical. It's a bluff. It's all the bluff of a desperate loser. If you really had something serious going on, you would have gone to the police a long time ago. I was collecting evidence, I replied. You can't go in empty-handed. Besides, you're my family. I was hoping. I stopped talking before I finished my sentence. Hoped what? That we'd repent? Share it with you? Tasha snorted contemptuously. You were always naive. I pulled out another document and placed it in front of my father. Recognize it? It's a copy of Grandma's original will. I got it from a Hamilton notary, the same one who drew up the will before you brought in your expert. And right here, I pointed to a paragraph in the document. It clearly states that the house and all assets passed to me without condition or restriction. No division between family members as you've led me to believe. Mom and Tasha exchanged concerned glances. Dad kept a stony expression on his face, but I could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. And these, I laid out a few more documents, are copies of the house purchase agreements, the bank transfers, and the agreements you made me sign, with lawyers' notations of clear signs of fraud, misrepresentation, and breach of trust. There's no proof we forced you, my father hissed. You're a grown woman, you signed those documents. Yes, that will be harder to prove, I admitted. But in combination with the rest of your machinations, it would create a certain picture for the investigation. I could feel the adrenaline pulsing in my blood. Years of humiliation, neglect, and deceit had transformed into an icy calm. I felt no joy at their confusion, only a strange sense of release. Tasha was the first to try to change tactics. Her face suddenly softened and tears appeared in her eyes. Aaron, listen. She reached out and tried to touch mine. I pulled away. We're a family. Yes, there may have been some misunderstandings about Grandma's inheritance. Maybe we were too insistent. But that's no reason to destroy everything we have. What do we have, Tasha? I asked quietly. You have a house, money, a social standing built on lies and fraud. I have an apartment, an old car, and a job, as you kindly reminded me. And decades of ridicule, humiliation, and neglect. You've always been overly sensitive, Mom interjected, her voice suddenly soft. We just wanted you to be stronger, more confident. All of our remarks were out of love. I laughed. It's not love, Mom. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. Okay, my father said sharply, slapping his palm on the table. What do you want? Money? A house? Name your price. Now you're offering me a bribe? I shook my head. That's an interesting twist. Not a bribe, he wrinkled his nose. Compensation. For the, misunderstanding about the inheritance? For fraud and deceit, I corrected him. Call things by their proper names, Dad. Okay, he sighed. For fraud. How much? I stayed silent, looking at the three of them. They looked at me with expectation, anxiety, and calculation. They thought they could still buy me, manipulate me, thought they knew me. I don't want money, I finally said. I want justice. Justice? Tasha laughed nervously. Is this some kind of cheap drama? I want justice, she mocked. You want to ruin our lives out of revenge, and you ruined mine out of greed, I replied calmly. The only difference is the motive. Aaron, think about it, Mom changed to a pleading tone. If you go to the police with this, the scandal will affect you. People will talk, Judge. You'll never get a decent job after that. Maybe, I agreed. But you know, it's funny. For years you've been telling me that I'm a loser, that my life is empty and worthless, that I had nothing to lose. I guess in a way you're right. I do have nothing to lose except my self-esteem, and I'm not giving that up again. My father suddenly changed tactics. His face darkened and his voice became low and threatening. You don't know what you're playing with, girl. I have connections, influence. You think they keep you on the job for nothing? I make a few calls. You'll be on the street tomorrow without a dime. I'm recording this conversation, I said, pointing to the phone next to the folder. And it just sounded like a threat, which will make you worse in the investigation. The bluff had worked. Dad turned pale and recoiled as if I'd hit him. You've thought this through, Tasha said quietly, and for the first time all night, there was something like respect in her voice. 3 years of planning, I nodded. That's a lot of time to take everything into account. So now what? Mom asked, her voice shaking. You're going to send us to prison? Your own family? I looked her straight in the eye. You stopped being my family the day you decided to steal from me under the guise of family ties. Tasha suddenly jumped up and ran out of the room. I heard her hurrying up the stairs. My mother turned even paler, and my father sat motionless, his eyes staring through me. She's gone to destroy the documents, I said calmly. It's no use. I have copies of everything I need, in several places. You've become different, Dad said quietly. When did that happen? I've always been like this, I answered. It's just that you never saw fit to really get to know me. You were more comfortable with your version of me as a battered loser to be pushed around. Tasha returned, holding her checkbook. Her face was determined. Here. She placed the book in front of me. Write any amount you want, right now. And all of this, she pointed to the folder, will disappear. You'll get your money, your house, whatever. And we'll be done. Forever. I looked at the checkbook. I admit, I was tempted to take the money and leave, start a new life somewhere far away from Fontana. From them. But something inside me resisted. And what's to stop you from stopping the check payment as soon as I walk out the door? I asked. Or file a report against me for extortion? Tasha turned pale. Apparently, that was exactly what she was thinking. Nothing, my father answered for her. But you can insist on a wire transfer, right now. It's not about the money, I shook my head. It's about principle. Jesus, Aaron, Mom exploded. What principles? This is life, not a philosophical treatise. Take the money and leave us alone. I closed the folder and carefully put it back in my briefcase. Then I stood up, feeling the water still dripping from my clothes. You're right about one thing, I said, looking at the three of them. I've really changed. The old Aaron would have agreed to your terms, would have taken the money and walked away, grateful for the crumbs from your table. But that Aaron is gone. What are you going to do? Tasha asked, her voice sounding almost frightened. What I should have done a long time ago, I answered. Go to law enforcement. You'll destroy us, Mom whispered. Do you realize that? You destroyed yourselves, I countered. With your greed, your arrogance, and your disregard for the law. I'm just showing the consequences. Give us time, Father said suddenly. At least a week. We can make things right. Give you your inheritance back with interest. Make it legal. What about tax fraud? Shell companies? Money laundering? I shook my head. There's no way to fix that with a simple transfer. We'll find a way, he insisted. There's always a way. Just give us a chance. I stared at them three people with whom I had blood ties, but from whom I felt nothing but bitterness and fatigue. They weren't remorseful. They were frightened, not by their actions, but by the consequences. If I hadn't found those documents, they would have continued as if nothing had happened. They would have continued inviting me to family dinners, humiliating me, laughing behind my back, thinking I was weak and stupid. No, I said firmly. No weak, no chance. You've exhausted your credibility. Is that your last word? Dad asked, his voice cold. Yes. Then you are no longer our daughter, he said with the same tone he used to talk about the weather or traffic. A casual dismissal of his own child. I haven't been your daughter for a long time, I replied. I just didn't realize it. We're going to fight, Tasha warned. We have money, connections. You're not going to win this war. Maybe, I shrugged. But even if you do, all of this, I circled the luxurious dining room, built on lies and deceit, will come crashing down. And that's a victory. Mom began to cry uncontrollably, loudly, almost theatrically. At other times, I would have felt a pang of guilt, rushed to comfort, to apologize. But not today. Stop it, Laurel, my father shouted. Your crocodile tears don't touch anyone. How can you be so callous? She screamed at him. Our family is falling apart. Our family is long gone, I answered in my father's place. There are only convenient accomplices. You're going to regret this, Tasha said through gritted teeth. I swear you'll regret it. I glanced at my watch. It had been almost 10 minutes since Tasha had splashed water in my face and given me 10 minutes to leave her house. Time's up, I said, slinging the strap of my briefcase over my shoulder. Your 10 minutes for prayers are over, and so is my 10 minutes to get out of here. I headed toward the dining room exit, feeling their stares on my back. At the door, I turned around. They sat motionless like wax figures, frozen in the moment of realization of disaster. My mother with smeared mascara, my father with a stone face, Tasha with an expression of impotent rage, my family, my former family. Goodbye, I said, and walked out without looking back. When I left Tasha's house, I didn't get into my car right away. I stood in the driveway for a few minutes, letting the cool evening air soothe my burning cheeks. Clouds were gathering in the sky, heralding rain. Just the right weather for just the right moment. Everything happened just as I'd imagined on sleepless nights, running through possible scenarios in my head. Threats, bribery attempts, manipulation, denial. I was prepared for all of it. But why was there such an emptiness inside? I expected triumph, a sense of liberation. Instead, only fatigue and a strange numbness. I made it home in 20 minutes, feeling my wet clothes clinging to my skin the whole way. When I parked outside my modest apartment building, I sat in the car for a long time, staring blankly ahead of me. The reality of what was happening began to slowly dawn on me. I had just severed all relationships with my family. Forever. Life as I knew it was over. The unknown was ahead. The first thing I did in the apartment was shower, washing away not only the water Tasha had poured on me, but what seemed to be the last traces of the old Erin, the one who'd allowed herself to be humiliated, who'd hoped for approval from people who were never going to give it. Wrapping myself in my robe, I made myself a strong tea and sat down on the couch. The briefcase with my papers stood beside me, a silent reminder that there was no turning back. I could have retreated further, hid the documents back in the safe, pretended it never happened, avoided family gatherings, lived my own little separate life. But some part of me knew that if I gave up now, I would lose all respect for myself. My phone vibrated, an incoming call. Tasha. I rejected it. A minute later, another call, this time from my mother. I rejected it too, then another from my father. After the third rejected call, the messages started coming in. Tasha. Pick up the phone, you coward. You think you can just walk away after this? Mom. Erin, please, let's talk. We can work this out as a family. Dad. You have one last chance to come to your senses before you make an irreparable mistake. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Instead, I muted my phone and put its screen down. The tea was getting cold, untouched. Outside the window, the rain began to fall. First sparse drops, then an actual downpour, drumming against the glass. I didn't sleep much that night. I went through the documents, put them in a new order, preparing for the next step. In the morning, I called into work and took the day off the first time in 3 years without notice. My boss, Horace Baird, sounded concerned, atypical for me. But I assured him it was fine, just a personal emergency. At 9 o'clock in the morning, I was already at the Fontana tax assessor's office. The reception area smelled of old paper and sanitizer. A middle-aged woman with tired eyes looked at me over her glasses. What can I do for you? I need to file a tax fraud report, I said quietly so the other visitors wouldn't hear. She didn't seem surprised, probably not the first such report for her. You need to fill out a form and speak to an inspector. Do you have any proof? I patted my briefcase. More than enough. Half an hour later, I was sitting across from Inspector Lloyd Duckett, a short man with balding hair and a penetrating gaze. On his desk were copies of key documents from my folder, and he was scrutinizing them, occasionally glancing up at me. Ms. Mercer, he said finally, these charges are very serious, especially since your family is involved. I understand, I nodded. Believe me, this decision has not been easy for me. I have to ask, do you realize the consequences? Not only for your relatives, but for you as well? These cases rarely remain confidential, especially in small towns like Fontana. I'm ready for it, I answered, though my insides clenched at the thought of public scandal. Duckett nodded, making notes in his notebook. We'll conduct a preliminary investigation. If the facts are confirmed, the case will be referred to the prosecutor's office. You'll have to make an official statement. I understand. And one more thing. He looked me straight in the eye. If there are powerful people involved, there may be, uncomfortable, pressure, threats. Are you sure you're ready for that? I remembered my father's face when he told me I was no longer his daughter. Tasha's cold eyes, promising revenge. My mother's theatrical sobs. I'm sure, I answered firmly. As I walked out of the IRS building, I felt a strange feeling, a mixture of anxiety and relief. The process had begun, and there was no stopping it. There was no turning back. When I got home, I found 12 missed calls and 23 messages. Without looking, I deleted them all and blocked the numbers of family members. That was just the beginning. I knew they'd find ways to get through to me. But today I needed a break. Toward evening, there was a knock on the door. I froze. No one I knew was supposed to come. Through the peephole, I saw Tasha. She looked exhausted, her makeup unable to hide her tear-stained eyes. Aaron, open up! I know you're in there! She shouted, banging on the door again. We need to talk! I didn't move, barely breathing. The knocking grew louder, almost to a rumble. Aaron, don't be a baby! Open the damn door! Neighbors started peering out of their apartments. I realized that the scandal was just beginning, and it was better to deal with Tasha right away than to let her make a scene in the hallway. I opened the door but left the chain behind. What do you want? I asked coldly. To talk. Her voice sounded almost pleading. Please, Aaron. Just you and me. No parents. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just slam the door shut, but the other part still remembered Tasha holding my hand on the first day of school. Tasha braiding my braids. Tasha, who we'd once shared secrets with under the covers with a flashlight. I removed the chain and stepped back, letting her inside. Tasha looked around my humble apartment with poorly concealed disdain, but said nothing. She looked out of place in her designer suit among my simple furniture. Tea? Coffee? I offered mechanically. No need for anything, she shook her head. I came to offer you a deal, of course. No remorse, no apologies, just a deal. I'm not interested, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. You didn't even listen to me, Tasha said indignantly. We're willing to give you the full value of your grandmother's inheritance, with interest for all these years, and additional compensation for moral damages. And in return for what? You take back your application and destroy all copies of the documents. I shook my head. It's too late, Tasha. The investigation is already underway. It can be stopped, she insisted. Dad has connections, but we need your consent. What about everything else? Tax fraud, shell companies, money laundering? It's not just about Grandma's inheritance anymore. Tasha took a deep breath, clearly holding back her irritation. Look, Aaron, you have to realize that you're on the warpath, against your own family. Think about the consequences, the scandal, the effect it will have on all of us. I've been thinking about it for 3 years, I replied. Did you think about the consequences when you lied to me? When you mocked me at the family table? When you poured water on my head yesterday and kicked me out of the house? Tasha's face contorted. It was just an emotional moment. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did, I interrupted her. That's exactly what you wanted, to humiliate me, to show your power. You always do. Tasha changed tactics, her face suddenly softening and tears welling up in her eyes. Aaron, please. I know I haven't been the best sister, but we're still family. Blood is not water. Are you really ready to send us to prison? I'm not sending you to prison, I countered. You put yourselves there by your actions. I just don't have your back anymore. What about my children? She sounded hysterical. Have you thought about them? What will it be like for them to grow up knowing their aunt put their mother behind bars? That was a low blow. I loved her kids, even though I rarely saw them. But I also knew that Tasha was using them as a manipulative tool. Your children hardly know me, I said calmly. You made sure of that by limiting our communication. And let's be honest, they practically live in a boarding house. You're vindictive, heartless. I think you should leave, I pointed to the door. I have no desire to continue this conversation. Tasha stood up abruptly, her face contorted with rage. You're going to regret this, Aaron. I swear you will. We're not going to let some jealous loser ruin everything we've built. Goodbye, Tasha. I opened the door, keeping my exterior calm even though my insides were trembling. This isn't over, she said as she walked out. You think you've won, but this is just the beginning. When the door closed, I leaned my back against it and slowly slid to the floor. Only now did I feel my hands shaking, my heart beating fast. Tasha's visit had pierced the first crack in my resolve. Was I really ready to ruin the lives of people who, against all odds, were my family? I lay awake all night, turning from side to side, hearing Tashi's accusations in my head. In the morning, Inspector Duckett called to tell me that the preliminary inspection had confirmed my accusations, and the case had been referred to the prosecutor's office. He also mentioned that he had already received several calls from interested parties trying to keep the case quiet. This just confirms the seriousness of the situation, he said. Be careful, Ms. Mercer, and if there is any pressure or threats, let us know immediately. After the conversation, I decided to go back to work. It didn't make sense to stay home and stress myself out. But when I got to the office, the atmosphere was strange. Colleagues were avoiding my gaze, whispering behind my back. Horace Baird called me into his office almost immediately. "Aaron," he began, tapping his fingers nervously on his desk. "I got a call from Wilbur Mercer, your father." I felt a chill go through me. "What did he say?" "He implied that you were, experiencing some personal problems, possibly psychological, that you made false accusations against your family because of a long-standing grudge." "And you believed him?" I tried to speak calmly. "I know you to be an excellent accountant and a responsible employee," Horace replied cautiously. "But I must admit that the situation is unusual." "I've filed a formal report of tax crimes," I said, "with documentary evidence. The IRS has already started an investigation. It's not a personal problem." Horace looked even more concerned. "Your father mentioned that you might have misused your access to the company's financial records. That's it. They decided to attack me through my work. All the company documents I used are publicly available to the accounting department," I replied. "I haven't violated any confidentiality rules." "That's good." Horace nodded, but I could see that he wasn't completely convinced. "Nevertheless, given the delicacy of the situation, perhaps you should take a leave of absence for the duration of the investigation." "Are you suspending me?" I asked him bluntly. "No, no." He held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "I'm just suggesting that we distance ourselves temporarily, for your own good." "For the good of the company, you mean?" I corrected him. "Wilbur Mercer is a powerful consultant and you don't want to come between us." Horace didn't deny it. "Look, Aaron, this is business. It's nothing personal." "Of course." I stood up. "I'll take a vacation, on my own dime." "Thank you for understanding," Horace said with visible relief. Good luck. With the investigation and everything." I gathered my personal belongings under the prying eyes of my colleagues and left the office. Sitting in my car in the parking lot, I felt real fear for the first time. The family had sprung into action, and this was only the first step. They will try to discredit me, isolate me, intimidate me. They have money, connections, influence. All I have is the truth and documents. Is that enough? In the evening, there was another ring at the door. This time it was my mother. She looked 10 years older, with shadows under her eyes and her usually immaculate hair disheveled. "We need to talk," she said without greeting. I stepped back silently, letting her come in. "Your father's in the hospital," she said as soon as the door closed. It caught me off guard. "What happened?" "A heart attack," she gave me an accusing look. "Last night. The doctor said it was from stress." I felt a pang of guilt, but I reminded myself it was just another manipulation. "I'm sorry," I said neutrally. "I hope he gets better." "Is that all you have to say?" Mother exclaimed. "Your father could die because of you." "If he has heart problems, it's not because of me. It's because of his own illegal actions," I countered. "And because of the stress they cause." "How can you be so heartless?" She shook her hands. "We raised you, gave you everything." "You gave me nothing," I interrupted. "My grandmother paid for my education. I earned everything else on my own. Unlike Tasha, who got money from you for a business, a house, a car." "Tasha always valued family," exclaimed her mother. "And you've never been grateful. Always thought you were special, better than us." I shook my head, realizing the point of this conversation. We spoke different languages, lived in different realities. "What do you want, Mom? Why did you come here?" She straightened up, trying to gather her thoughts. "Take the application. Stop all this madness. For Dad, for Tasha, for me, for my family." "I can't," I said. "Even if I wanted to, the process is already in motion." "Nothing is set in motion," she exclaimed angrily. "Everything can be stopped. Your father talked to the prosecutor. He's willing to settle the matter if you drop the charges." "Resolve the matter?" I grinned. "You mean bribe me? Another crime in a long list." "It's a normal business practice," she defended herself. "Everyone does it." "No, Mom. Not everyone forges documents, cheats the IRS, and steals from their own children." My mother looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "What happened to you, Aaron? You weren't like this. Tough." "I grew up," I said. I stopped turning a blind eye to what was going on around me. She shook her head as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Your father was right, you know. You're not our daughter anymore. I felt something inside me break, the last thread that held me to this woman, to this family. I think you should leave, I said quietly. She headed for the door, but turned around on the threshold. This isn't over, Aaron. We're not going to let you destroy everything we've built. After she left, I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the street. Strangely, after my mother's visit, my doubts disappeared. Not a hint of remorse, only anger, accusations, and attempts at manipulation. They hadn't changed and wouldn't change. I had made my decision and no longer doubted it. Whatever happened next, I would go through it with my head held high. For me. For the Aaron they'd been trying to break for years. And for the grandmother who believed in me when no one else would. I was finally ready for the war I'd declared on myself. Because sometimes peace is worse than war, especially a peace built on lies. Autumn sunshine flooded the small office in the courthouse, giving the illusion of warmth. Though outside the window I could already feel the breath of approaching winter. I stared at my reflection in the polished surface of the desk. A calm face, a straight back, hands resting calmly in my lap. Nothing betrayed the storm of emotion inside. Ms. Mercer, Judge Hampton, an older man with shrewd eyes and graying temples, looked at me over his glasses. From a formal standpoint, all the necessary procedures have been completed. The court's decision has come into effect, and now the property of your grandmother, Edna Mercer, is officially returned to you in full, including compensation for illegal use. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Sign right here. He pointed to the document in front of him. And everything will be formalized. My hand barely shook as I signed. 6 months. It had taken 6 long months for justice to be served. 6 months of struggle, humiliation, threats, and fear. 6 months that changed me forever. Congratulations, the judge smiled slightly. You have shown great courage. I walked out of the courthouse with a feeling of strange emptiness. It was the last chord of a long and agonizing symphony, the final touch in the picture of my release. The main events had happened earlier. My family's trial had ended a month ago. None of them admitted their guilt until the very end. Even when the evidence was incontrovertible, even when their own partners and accomplices testified, they continued to deny the obvious. Tasha cried on camera, playing the victim of a family vendetta. The father kept a stony expression on his face, refusing to answer questions. The mother played the role of a grief-stricken woman who couldn't understand how her beloved daughter could do such a thing. The press happily covered every detail of the trial. Family scandal in Fontana, daughter sends parents to jail, accountant avenges family for stolen inheritance, blood ties and financial fraud, the Mercer family on trial. My name and face were on the front pages of local newspapers. On social media, opinions were divided. Some called me a heroine, others called me a traitor. I didn't care. I wasn't looking for approval, only justice. The sentence was milder than I expected. My father got 3 years probation because of his age and health problems. Mother got 2 years probation and a heavy fine. Tasha was less lucky, 2 years in prison for tax fraud and money laundering. Her beauty parlor was shut down, her assets seized. Her husband Brent filed for divorce a week after the verdict, not wanting to be implicated in the scandal. I didn't feel triumph as they were led out of the courtroom, only fatigue and a strange desolation. Revenge wasn't as sweet as the movies promise, but I wouldn't call it bitter, more like necessary. Now, walking down the steps of the court with the documents on the return of inheritance, I felt something like relief for the first time in a long time. Like a heavy backpack had been lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I was no longer helpless. I had chosen my path and walked the rest of the way. Waiting for me at the foot of the stairs was Marjorie Kim, my attorney, a short, middle-aged woman with a piercing gaze and an iron grip. She became not just my legal representative, but my support throughout the entire process. Is everything ready? She asked, looking at the file in my hands. Yes, I nodded. Finally. Well, she smiled. Then I officially congratulate you, Ms. Mercer. You are now the owner of a house on Magnolia Street and a substantial amount of money in your bank account. Thank you, Marjorie, for everything. You're welcome, she shrugged. I was just doing my job. You did the hardest part, making the decision to fight. We walked down the street to my car, the same used Ford, though I could afford something better now. I have something for you, Marjorie said, pulling an envelope out of her bag. It came yesterday. I was supposed to give it to you. I took the envelope and recognized the handwriting, Tasha. My heart sank. You don't have to read it, Marjorie said, seeing my reaction. Or answer. Your obligation to your family is over. I know, I replied, slipping the envelope into my pocket. It's just weird. It's not weird, she shook her head. They lost, and now they're trying to find a new approach. Typical of people like that. I nodded, knowing she was right. Over the past 6 months, I'd gotten dozens of emails, calls, messages, first threatening, then pleading, then accusing, and finally trying to reconcile. I haven't responded to a single one. In any case, Marjorie continued, what do you plan to do next? Are you going to stay at Fontana, I wondered? It was a question I'd been asking myself for the last few weeks. Fontana had been my home all my life. But now, after everything that had happened, the city seemed foreign. Too many memories, too many looks, judgmental, curious, pitying. I don't know, I answered honestly. I hadn't decided yet. We reached my car and Marjorie held out her hand for a handshake. Whatever you decide, Erin, remember, you deserve to be happy. After everything you've been through. Thank you, I shook her hand. I'll try to remember that. At home, I sat staring at the unopened envelope for a long time. What could Tasha write when she was in prison? Another accusation? A plea for forgiveness? Threats? Part of me wanted to just throw the letter away without reading it. But the other part, the part that had always sought the approval and love of these people, demanded to know the contents. Finally, I opened the envelope. Inside was a doubled folded piece of paper. Erin, I'm writing this letter from a place I never thought I'd see from the inside. There's a lot of time for reflection here. Too much. I won't pretend to forgive you, or that I understand your motives. You destroyed our family, my business, my marriage. My children will grow up knowing their mother is a criminal, all because of you. But I also have to admit, if only to myself, that we brought this on ourselves. For years we used you, manipulated you, neglected you. I was a terrible sister. My parents were terrible parents. We deserved what we got. That's not an apology. I'm not apologizing. I'm just stating a fact. We were family in blood, never in spirit. When I walk out of here, I'm gonna have to start from scratch. No money, no reputation, no support. Just like you've been living all these years. Maybe that's fair. Don't answer that letter. Don't visit me. We both know we have nothing more to say. Tasha. I reread the letter 3 times, trying to figure out how I felt. There was no relief at the admission of guilt, no gloating at her downfall. Just a quiet sadness for what had never been true family love and support. I folded the letter and put it away in my desk drawer. Perhaps someday I would reread it again, but not now. Right now, I had to move on. The next day, I went to check out my grandmother's house, my home now. It had stood empty all these years after my mother had been unable to sell it because of the investigation that had begun. A 2-story Victorian house with a veranda and garden, in need of renovation but still beautiful. I put the key in the lock and stepped inside. The air was musty, dust everywhere, but underneath I could smell a familiar odor, lavender and old books, the smell of Edna's grandmother. I walked slowly around all the rooms, running my hand over the furniture covered in dusty covers, looking at the faded pictures on the walls. Here are my grandparents on their wedding day, so young and happy. Here's my father as a child, a smiling boy with a fishing rod. Here's Tasha and me on the swings in the garden, laughing with matching pigtails. Who were we then? Who did we become then? And where did it all go wrong? In my grandmother's bedroom, everything was untouched. The books on the bedside table, the glasses in their case, the shawl on the back of the chair. It was as if she'd only been out for a minute and was about to return. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling tears come to my eyes. Grandma was the only person who really loved me, accepted me for who I was. She left me an inheritance, Not because she thought I was better than Tasha, but because she saw how I was treated and wanted to protect me. I miss you, Grandma, I whispered into the emptiness of the room. I hope you would approve of what I did. As I left the house, I realized I couldn't live here. Too many memories, too many attachments to the past. I decided to sell the house, but this time on my own terms, honestly and openly. 2 weeks later, I quit my job. After everything that had happened, coming back to Western Foundations was impossible. And the city itself seemed too close, too intertwined with the history I wanted to leave behind. I decided to move, not too far away, but enough to make a fresh start. I chose Cedarwood, a small town about 3 hours from Fontana. Close enough to manage the sale of my grandmother's house, but far enough away to avoid the constant reminders of the past. In late November, I moved my belongings into my new apartment, spacious, bright, and overlooking a small park. For the first time in my life, I could afford a place to live without having to count every penny. The money from my grandmother's inheritance gave me a freedom of choice I'd only dreamed of before. No one in Cedarwood knew me. No one whispered behind my back about the daughter who put her parents away. I could just be Erin, a woman with an unusual profession and a quiet personality. I took a job as a financial consultant at a small firm where my attention to detail and analytical skills were valued. Letters from my family continued to come, but less frequently. My father wrote dryly and formally, mostly about practical matters, his probation, his health, his financial affairs. The mother alternated between accusations and pleas for forgiveness, creating an emotional roller coaster on paper. Tasha never wrote again after that first letter. I kept their messages in a separate folder, but rarely reread them. They were part of a past that no longer had power over me. In early spring, Diane Fowler, Brent's ex-sister-in-law and wife, tracked me down. She wanted to meet, to talk. I agreed, albeit cautiously. We met at a neutral place, a coffee shop halfway between our towns. Diane looked tired but determined. She got straight to the point. "The kids have been asking about you," she said, stirring her coffee. "Especially Lily. She remembers you bringing her books." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Lily, Tasha's middle daughter, was a quiet, dreamy girl, so much like me as a child. "How are they?" I asked. "After everything?" "They're doing fine," Diana shrugged. "The kids are remarkably resilient, but they need a family, a real family." "Tasha's their mother," I reminded her. "No matter what she does." "I know," Diana nodded. "And when she gets out, they'll see her. But for now, I thought maybe you might want to be a part of their lives, as an aunt, not as a replacement for Tasha." It got me thinking. The kids weren't to blame for their parents' crimes, for the toxicity of our family. They deserved better. "I'd like that," I finally answered. "But I'm not sure Tasha would approve." "Tasha's going to have to put up with a lot when she gets out," Diana said stiffly, "including the fact that her children need all the family support they can get." I agreed to regular meetings with the kids, not too frequent, but enough to make a connection. Lily really remembered me and the books I gave her. The older one, Jason, was wary but polite. The youngest, Poppy, barely remembered me, but quickly became attached when I showed her how to make paper cranes, an art my grandmother had taught me. My life gradually took on a new shape, a new rhythm. I began to spend more time in nature, hiking in the surrounding hills, photographing sunrises, collecting stones on the shore of the lake. I started taking ceramics classes. Creating something with my own hands was surprisingly therapeutic. In June, I received an offer to buy my grandmother's house, a fair price from a couple who had fallen in love with its Victorian charm. I accepted, and the transaction went smoothly. It was strange signing the papers knowing that this house would never again be associated with the Mercer family. But I felt my grandmother would have approved of my choice. A year after the lawsuit began, I received another letter from my mother. This time it was different. No accusations, no emotional manipulation, just a direct request for a meeting. "I want to talk to you in person," she wrote. "Not about forgiveness or reconciliation, just to talk, like two adults. I think we both deserve it." I pondered for a long time before replying. Part of me feared a new trap, a new attempt at manipulation. But the other part wanted to close this chapter of my life definitively, with complete clarity. We met in Fontana's public park, a neutral area with plenty of witnesses. Mother looked aged but well groomed. Her hair was still perfectly colored and her clothes were impeccable. Some things never change. "Thank you for coming," she said as we sat down on the bench by the fountain. "What did you want to talk about?" I asked bluntly. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I'm not going to apologize," she began. "We both know that would be insincere. I still think you were too cruel to your own family." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "But I also understand why you did it," she continued. "We I wasn't a good mother to you. I've always favored Tasha, always put her wishes above yours. That's wrong." I looked at her in surprise. I never expected to hear such a confession. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you always choose her?" Mother smiled sadly. "Because she was like me, loud, outgoing, ambitious. And you always reminded me of your grandfather. Quiet, thoughtful, with that never-ending book in your hand. I just didn't understand you." We talked for a long time, about the past, about childhood, about the decisions that brought us to this point. There were no tears or dramatic confessions, just a quiet, honest conversation between two adults, realizing that some bridges can no longer be rebuilt. "You'll never forgive us, will you?" she asked at the end. "It's not about forgiveness," I replied. "It's about realizing that some relationships can't and shouldn't be saved. They were toxic from the beginning." "And are you happy now? Without your family?" I pondered her question. Am I happy? Not in the euphoric sense of the word, but in a deep, grounded way. "I'm free," I answered. "Free from expectations, from having to conform to standards that don't fit me. Free to be myself. And yes, that's happiness for me." We parted with no promises of future meetings, no plans to reunite. Just two people who recognized that their paths had diverged, and that's okay. As I drove back to Cedarwood, I felt a strange calm. Not the triumph of a victor, not the bitterness of resentment, just a quiet confidence that I was on the right path. At home, I found a letter from the director of the orphanage thanking me for the donation I'd made from the money from the sale of my grandmother's house. I invested some of the money in my future, but a significant amount went to help children without family support. Perhaps my money would help someone avoid the loneliness I felt even when surrounded by family. In the evening, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment watching the sunset. The sky had turned shades of gold and purple, gradually giving way to the deep blue of night. I thought about the strange path that had brought me here from a depressed, insecure woman to someone capable of standing up for what was right, even if it meant losing everything. I didn't know what lay ahead of me. Perhaps someday I would start my own family, this time a healthy one based on mutual respect and support. Perhaps I would go on to build my career, travel, explore new hobbies. What was important was that I was now making these choices on my own, not looking back at other people's expectations or seeking to earn the approval of those who could never give it. I remembered my grandmother's words about the painting of the stormy sea. Even in the worst storm, there is a shore somewhere. You just have to sail in the right direction. I sailed through my storm and found my shore. Not perfect, not cloudless, but my own. I was finally free. Free from a toxic family, from past hurts, from having to conform to other people's standards. Free to make my own life according to my own rules. And that was the best inheritance I could have gotten.